I got him.
We have a location. Coordinates coming your way.
She's on a jet. Destination unknown.
Talk us through the worst case scenario here.
How bad can this get?
Time's not on our side.
I don't think you understand what they'll do to her when they get her out of this country.
Find a Byron, but the fallout from this is limitless.
Lioness Season 3 just dropped a trailer for episode 4 that might be hiding one of the biggest betrayals this show has ever set up. And once you see what's buried inside it, you're not going to look at Caitlyn the same way again. Season 3 has already put Joe through 6 months of hell, and episode 4, titled Murder Hornets, is the moment where everything the show has been quietly building toward could finally break open. Before we get into what the trailer is hinting at, I want to be upfront with you. Nothing about Caitlyn being compromised has been confirmed by the show. What we're about to walk through is a theory built entirely on what's been shown on screen, and what the official preview for episode 4 is teasing. But once you line up everything Caitlyn has done since the season started, it gets a lot harder to ignore. Let's rewind to where we actually are right now, because the timeline this season is playing with is part of what makes this theory so unsettling. Episode 3 spent almost the entire hour explaining in painfully clear terms that you don't take down a country like the United States with tanks and soldiers anymore. You do it by turning the country against itself from the inside, using leaks, disinformation, and officials who've already been quietly compromised. That idea wasn't just dialogue filler. It was the show handing us the exact playbook we now need to judge every character's behavior against, including the people we've trusted from day one. By the end of that episode, Caitlyn's own strategy, the plan she described as setting the barn on fire to smoke out the mice hiding inside it, finally caught up to where the story is now. And the cost of that plan was Joe, strapped down and being tortured while her captors calmly watched. That's not a small detail. Caitlyn was the one who pushed for the aggressive move that put Joe in that room in the first place. She was also the one most uncomfortable when Joe wanted to go public and announce that Russian and Chinese moles were operating inside the American government. At the time, that discomfort read as caution, the voice of experience trying to keep a volatile operation from spinning out. But caution and self-preservation can look identical from the outside. And that's exactly the kind of ambiguity this show has built its entire identity on. Here's where it gets more interesting. Joe's plan to leak word that a Russian operative had been caught and was actively blackmailing American assets was designed to flush out anyone with something to hide. It was meant to make compromised people panic. And it worked maybe too well, because whoever grabbed Joe moved with a speed and precision that suggests they already knew exactly where to find her. That kind of response doesn't usually come from people improvising. It comes from people who had inside knowledge, or from people close enough to Joe's operation to know her movements before the leak ever went public. If Caitlyn had any role in guiding that leak, or any awareness of what it would trigger, that puts her disturbingly close to the moment Joe disappeared. Then there's the matter Alexandra dropped during her interrogation, the claim that she has 5 sitting U.S. senators on her asset list. Think about what that actually means for a second. If even one of those senators had access to classified briefings, had relationships inside the Lioness chain of command, or had ever crossed paths with Caitlyn's operations, the leak wouldn't just have exposed foreign assets. It would have put a target directly on anyone connected to those senators, including the people managing this entire program from the top down. Alexandra also insisted she never gave up Joe's identity, and both Kyle and Cruz seemed convinced enough by her defense to ease off. Joe wasn't buying it, and honestly neither was I. But if Alexandra really is telling the truth about protecting Joe's cover, that raises an uncomfortable question. If it wasn't her, and it wasn't a random Russian handler acting on old information, then who inside this circle had the access and the motive to make sure Joe never made it home from that leak? That brings us back to Caitlyn, and to a pattern that's been quietly forming since the season premiere. She keeps her own counsel. She makes decisions without fully looping in the people who'll be affected by them. She pushed for the exact strategy that put Joe in danger, and she was the one person most against making any of it public. None of that proves she's working against her own country. People in this line of work are trained to be secretive, calculating, and slow to trust, even with their own team. But the show has spent 3 episodes teaching us that the most dangerous threats aren't the ones charging at you head-on. They're the ones sitting quietly in the room with you, nodding along, waiting for the right moment. And that's exactly the kind of doubt the episode 4 trailer seems determined to plant, because what it shows next changes the entire shape of this theory. The official synopsis for episode 4 is short, but it's doing a lot of work if you read it closely. It describes a frantic hunt being launched as the team races against time. While at home, Neil struggles with growing fears. On the surface, that sounds like a straightforward rescue mission paired with a family subplot. But the word frantic is doing something specific here. It's not describing a calm, methodical extraction. It's describing a team that's lost control of the timeline. A team reacting instead of planning. And if Caitlyn is the one steering the response from behind the scenes, the way she's been steering nearly every major decision since the season began, then the panic in that hunt might not just be about finding Jo in time. It might be about controlling what Jo says if she's found alive. Think about what Jo actually knows at this point. She's been through 6 months of captivity, and by the end of episode 3, brutal torture that already forced her to give up the location of a tracking device. That's not a small crack in her defenses. That's a warning sign that more information could already be leaking out of her. Piece by piece, the longer this goes on. If Caitlyn has anything to hide, anything at all connecting her to the leak, to the senators on Alexandra's list, or to decisions made long before this season even started, then Jo surviving and talking becomes just as dangerous to Caitlyn as Jo never being found at all. That's the kind of quiet, uncomfortable math this show has trained us to look for. And it's exactly why a rescue mission dressed up as good news could just as easily be read as damage control. Now let's talk about who's actually expected to lead that hunt, because this is where the trailer structure gets interesting. Based on how this show has operated in the past, and on the patterns already visible heading into episode 4, Cruz, Kyle, and the QRF team are the most likely candidates to go off the books entirely, bypassing official channels and leaning on unauthorized, black market intelligence to track down wherever Jo is being held. That detail matters because it tells you something important. If the official channels, the ones Caitlyn has influence over, aren't being trusted to lead this search, that's either standard operating procedure for a program this secretive, or it's a sign that someone on the inside doesn't fully trust the chain of command right now either. And if Cruz and Kyle are the ones forced to go rogue to save Jo, that puts even more distance between the people we're rooting for and the leadership making decisions above them. Then there's Alexandra, who cannot be separated from this theory no matter how hard you try. She agreed to act as bait, which on its own is either an incredibly brave move or an incredibly convenient one, depending on how much you trust her. If Alexandra genuinely worked with the CIA the entire time and her cover only got blown because of the leak Caitlyn helped push through, then Caitlyn's aggressive strategy didn't just endanger Jo. It may have burned one of the only assets who could have led them straight to the people actually responsible for all of this. But if Alexandra used the chaos of that leak to protect herself and hand Jo over to save her own exit out of the country, then the finger doesn't point at Caitlyn at all. It points right back at the woman Jo insisted on trusting against her team's better judgment. Both versions of this story are sitting on the table right now, and episode 4 looks built to start narrowing them down. And then there's Neil, and the growing fears the synopsis specifically calls out. We already watched Jo's daughters get targeted on the road in episode 3, a moment that should have been the final straw for any parent watching their family's safety erode in real time. Jo stayed in the job anyway, telling her daughters it was impossible to walk away, and in a strange way she may have been right, because leaving now wouldn't undo what she already knows or make her any less of a target. But Neil doesn't have the luxury of thinking about this the way Jo does. He's watching his family live under surveillance, watching school pickups turn into security operations, and now watching Jo vanish entirely with no clear timeline for when, or if she's coming back. If this worst-case scenario plays out the way the preview is suggesting, there's a real chance this isn't the episode where Neil finally breaks. It might be the episode where he finally decides he's done breaking for her. All of this circles back to the same uncomfortable center. Every thread this season has pulled: the leak, the torture, the missing tracking device, Alexandra's senators, Neil's unraveling patience, seems to trace back to decisions Caitlyn either made directly or influenced from just close enough to deny it later. None of it proves she's a Russian agent. But it's building a case for something almost as dangerous. Someone inside Jo's own circle whose loyalty has never actually been tested, only assumed. And there's one more detail buried in the trailer. One that changes how you should be watching Caitlyn in every scene from this point forward. That detail is timing. Every major crisis this season, the leak that likely triggered Jo's kidnapping, the decision to keep pushing Alexandra into dangerous territory, The choice to keep the family's protection detail as light as it's been, all of it lines up with moments where Caitlyn had the most influence in the room and the least oversight from anyone above her. That's not proof of betrayal. It's proof of opportunity. And on a show built entirely around asymmetrical warfare, where the real damage comes from patience and positioning rather than open confrontation, opportunity is often the only clue you get before the truth finally surfaces. So where does that leave us heading into Murder Hornets? If the theory holds up, Episode 4 isn't just about finding Joe before it's too late. It's about watching how Caitlyn behaves once the search actually starts closing in. Does she push for aggressive, fast action that conveniently keeps her in control of the narrative? Does she quietly steer resources away from the leads that might expose her own fingerprints on this mess? Or does she do exactly what a genuinely loyal handler would do? Throw everything she has at bringing Joe home, no matter what secrets that rescue might drag out into the light with her? The answer to that question might tell us more about who Caitlyn really is than anything she said out loud all season. And that's really the trap this show has set for its audience without us fully realizing it. We've spent 3 episodes trusting Caitlyn because she's experienced, because she's calculated, because everyone around her defers to her judgment without question. But this is a series that has already told us, in plain language, that the most effective way to dismantle a country from within isn't through an obvious enemy. It's through the quiet erosion of trust between the people who are supposed to be on the same side. If Caitlyn really is compromised, the damage was never going to come from a dramatic